All right. That was Simple Gifts, Quicker Folk Song, or also Aaron Copland's orchestra music, whichever you prefer. All right. Today we're going to talk about Osteon boats. Try again. Osteon Notes. Okay. Osteo has to do with bones, so obviously it has to do with bones. So let's see what we got here. All right. We'll talk about what osteon in particular means here in a minute. It's basically a unit that the bones are made out of, but we'll look at that here shortly. First, notice we are not going to have the notes in numerical order. We're not going to do 1, 2, 3, whatever. We're going to do them in order that talks about them best. Basically, as Mr. McMurray was too lazy to go and Photoshop all the numbers and redo all the numbers. So that's just the way it'll be. Get used to it. Get over it. We're done. All right. Number 9, osteocytes. All right. If you remember way back when, we talked about connective tissue and bones. Osteocytes just mean bone cells, okay? And so they are the part of the bone that is actually alive, all right? And if we look at this, if you remember, we saw a picture where it looked like circles, okay? Well, the reason it is because your bone is arranged like this with these columns of bone cells or osteons. We'll talk about that in a minute. But each of those little dots in there kind of represent where there is a bone cell. Okay, and the bone cells are the osteocytes, and they are actually alive. Okay, and they secrete the matrix, which actually makes the hard part of your bone that we normally think about when we talk about bone. So, bone cells are the living part. Hang on, let me find my cursor. There we go. All right, of the bone. Now, originally, they were secreted as osteoblast. All right, you think blast, oh, blows things up. But no, it actually builds things. Just remember fibroblasts we had with dense connective tissue, and they created fibers, okay? Well, osteoblasts are going to secrete calcium or bone material, okay? Now, once the cell gets on the outside of the bone, it attaches, it secretes calcium, and basically walls itself in. Once it becomes walled in, it's now mature, and it's called a osteocyte. Okay, kind of like a young kid going out having a blast all the time, but over time, responsibilities, family, income, having to keep up appearances, buy a house, all that stuff kind of locks you in, and you're kind of locked in. Okay, not trapped. I didn't say that, but you are kind of locked in and can't go anywhere much. Okay, you're kind of locked into your life. Okay, well, that's kind of what the osteocytes do, but they make an important part of your body, so it's not like they're trapped. All right. Now, so this here, if you look in these, there's little spaces up here, look at little critters, insects or something crawling around. Okay, if you look at one of those up close, the osteocyte is a cell that lives in this little space. So it leaves us a little bit of living space here, and it has little canals that connect it out to the outside world, okay? So the space right around it is going to be called the lacuna, not lacuna matata. That's a whole different thing, all right? That's a philosophy. All right, but we won't get in there. Okay, anyhow, cavity surrounding the osteocyte or the bone cell, that area around it where it lives in is called the lacuna. All right? Now, whoa. That one took off a little bit there, but let me see here. If I can find my thing, and I'll move my face out of the way. There we go. Okay. The little canals coming off it are called canaliculi. It sounds like they're making some kind of improper request to lick your face or something, or your eye or something. But anyhow, canaliculi just means little canals. So there's these little canals where they are full of interstitial fluid, which you remember is just the fluid on the outside of the cell, okay? And it connects this bone cell to other bone cells. It also connects them to the blood vessels. If you look here, we have blood vessels carrying stuff in. So it allows things to diffuse in, like nutrients and oxygen into the cell, and it allows waste and carbon dioxide to get out, okay? Because you've got to have those things coming in or out, or the cells are going to die. So canaliculi allow it to do that, all right? Now, number 11, we've talked about this on the long bone. The outside wrapper around the bone is, in fact, the periosteum. Okay, so here's the periosteum, and a little wrapper around the outside of the bone. Remember, it's the fibrous membrane that covers the outer surface of the long bone. So this little wrapper around it has a lot of blood vessels, we said, and stuff like that in it. So this is the periosteum. All right. Notice the blood vessels travel through it, underneath it, and then into the bone. So we said it had a lot of fibrous membrane, has a lot of blood supply and stuff there. All right, number 2, spongy bone. All right, this is the inside part of the cell here. Okay, if you remember our bone we looked at, you have the compact bone on the outside. That's going to be this part number 1 here, and we'll look at that more later. But that's part number 1 over here with all the little round things. But over here, you see how it kind of, there's big gaps and spaces and stuff like that. Okay, and so that is the spongy bone. Okay, so number 2, the inner side region here is where you're just starting to get some of this little spongy bone on the inside here. So that's what that represents. Okay, and it is made of scattered osteocytes. There are still osteocytes. You see the little insecty looking things here, osteocytes, and they have secreted enough matrix not to make solid bone like they did over here, but enough to connect them to the other osteocytes. And so there's kind of this network of osteocytes stuck in the hard matrix of the spongy bone. All right. Now, in the spaces, you notice number 8 here is just the spaces in between those, and that is the myeloid tissue or red bone marrow, which is a fancy name for red bone marrow. All right. Remember, this is where we said it makes your blood cells and all that good stuff. So this is what they're doing there. All right. On this model, I don't know if you can see it very good, okay, but here at the end you have your spongy bone where it goes, the white stuff. This redder stuff that's in between, pinkish red stuff here, that is the red bone marrow, okay, and it fills in all those spaces. And we said originally it was in the medullary cavity in the middle of the bone, but as you get older, it migrates up into the spongy bone, and this spongy bone could be in your sternum, your ribs, flat bones. It can also be at the end of your long bones, like your femur, and so forth. All right, so there are those. Now, that's the myeloid tissue. All right, and it makes your blood cells, both red and white blood cells. All right, and so we don't always think about that as something your skeleton does, but that's actually a function of tissue in your skeleton. All right, then we have section 1 back over here. Find my thing. There we go. Section 1, which is the compact bone, and this is where you see those little circular patterns we talked about for bone tissue. All right, dense bone that is made of cylindrical units known as osteons, and now you see why this is called the Osteon Notes. Okay, because these little units of bone are called osteons, which makes sense because they're bone, and osteo means bone, so osteons are just units of bones. Now, as you can see, there's all these little circular. Each one of these would be tubes coming up. Now, they wouldn't be perfectly round tubes because they overlap with each other and fill in the gaps in between them. But basically, they make these cylinder-type shapes, okay? And you have layers and layers of little bony material or matrix in here, all right? And that's what makes your bone. So each one of these, this would be an osteon, this would be an osteon, this would be an osteon. Every one of those little circles that you see there would be an osteon, 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 okay, so forth. You get the idea. All right, those are all osteons, okay? And those are the bone units that make up the dense bone tissue known as compact bone. All right, now, our next thing. Now, an osteon, then, number 10, down here, okay, which would be one of these cylinders, okay? One of these cylinders here, one of those cylinders, that cylinder, all these cylinders, each one is an osteon. Now, the fancier name used to be Haversian system because a guy named Havers, Havers, discovered them, okay? And in one of those rare fits of common sense, scientists said, hey, wouldn't it make more sense if we just called them osteons, because that tells what they are, rather than just naming them after some dude who found them. And in this case, it carried the day, and that's why they do it now. Okay? All right, so the osteon is a cylindrical unit that makes up the compact bone, which is kind of what we said up here. But all right, now we know the osteon, we know the compact bone. The compact bone is made of osteons. Osteon are the units that make up the compact bone. Kind of repeating ourselves, but that's okay. All right. Now, a lamella are the rings of matrixy material. All right. So if you look at number 7 here, there's a ring. There would be a lamella there. Lamella has in this case to do with, or lamellae, has to do with rings of the bony matrix or layers. It's another word for lamella would be layers. There are layers of solid bony material or matrix around each of these, and so the whole column is called the osteon, but these little layers of bone in it are called the lamella. All right, and it makes up those osteons. All right. Number 3 is a blood vessel. Now, we will call all these blood vessels. It could be an artery, could be a vein. Usually there's one coming in, one taking stuff back out. So there can be arteries and veins coming through the bone tissue. And this is just because it's got to pick up, bring oxygen and nutrients to these osteons. It also has to pick up waste products and stuff from the osteons. Okay? And so it brings in nutrients to the bone tissue. It carries away the waste, just like any other part of your cell. So even though these cells seem to be fairly isolated, all right, they still communicate and can get rid of things in and out thanks to the blood vessels. Because your blood, we said, unlike cartilage and tendons and ligaments, has lots of blood vessels, which makes it easy for it to heal itself. All right. I think we may finish this. Let's see. All right. Next thing is the central canal. Okay. In the center of each of these osteons, there is a hole going up and down it, the length of it. All right. And there is a red dot you see here. That's the central canal. That's where the blood vessel comes up the middle. All right. If you look at the end, you can see that there are ones going up here. Every one of these cylinders has a blood vessel coming up it. Okay. And so these blood vessels go up the middle of the osteon and bringing the nutrients and stuff to the blood cells there. Okay, so those are called central canal because they are parallel to the osteon, or they go up and down just like the osteon does. So they're parallel to the long bone, and this is where the blood vessels and nerves can go through the bone. Okay, now you also have ones that branch off and connect one central canal to the next central canal. All right, or the blood vessels there. And these are called transverse canals because they go side to side. Transverse means across. So they're going across. Perforating canals are also called perforating because they perforate the bone and go through the walls of the osteon to the next osteon. Okay, so you have transverse or perforating canals. All right, side canals that carry blood vessels and nerves through the compact bone toward the center of the bone. So the blood comes in the outside, works its way toward the middle, toward the spongy bone, and then it would usually they go out the end of the bone. All right, and that's basically an osteon. We have one last thing. The spongy bone over here, the shape of it, the little honeycomb type stuff, number 12 here, it hooks them all together. We're just going to say the name of it is the trabecula. Sounds like someone who should be doing Jeopardy. If Dracula and Alex Trebek got together, he would be called trabecula. All right. Anyhow, matrix of the spongy bone is the trabecula. The hard honeycomby looking stuff that we call spongy bone is called the trabecula, as opposed to the osteon, which is part of the compact bone. All right. That's basically it. The good news, bad news, we are done. The bad news is we have a quiz tomorrow. It will be kind of like the long bone quiz. It will involve labeling this drawing. But it will also involve knowing some of the definitions and have some fill-in-the-blank type questions, very similar to the long bone quiz. So please come back tomorrow and be here for that. All right. Have a great day.